All right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to Visualizing Infrastructure webinar. We're going to talk about utility network diagrams, what they are, why we might use them, along with some differences between ArcGIS schematics and network diagrams. We'll touch briefly on the difference between subnetwork system diagrams and standard diagrams, and we'll walk through a couple demos. The demos will include creating a basic diagram and applying diagram layouts. We'll apply map symbology to the diagrams. We'll do a little bit of editing diagram features, and then we'll create a new diagram template with some reduction rules applied. We'll use Model Builder for that. And lastly, we'll look at storing and then finding your diagrams. So let's start by talking about what a network diagram is. So network diagrams are visual representations that simplify and symbolically illustrate the components and connections within a utility network. So people like engineers tend to favor the more simplistic schematic view of network diagrams over the geographic view. So diagrams usually have a layout applied and are based on diagram templates. So diagram layouts are algorithms shaping how the diagram content is visually presented. So this could be representing a portion of the electric network in a tree layout with various orientations like top to bottom or left to right. It could also simply be squaring the edges of a diagram. A diagram template is the actual configuration, so it's a type of diagram. Esri gives a couple examples of diagrams specific to the electric utility, like a single line or switching diagram, which shows specific features laid out in a certain way. So earlier I mentioned subnetwork system diagrams and standard diagrams. So standard diagrams are created on demand and can represent any part of the network. They are created by selecting initial network features, choosing a template, and then applying a layout. They can be stored privately, overwritten, or deleted by the owner. You can update a standard diagram by using the Update Diagram tool, preserving layout and geometry by default. Standard diagrams are configurable with various diagram rules for flexible representations. Subnetwork system diagrams are stored publicly and represent the entire subnetwork. They are system managed during updates to the subnetworks. The content of a subnetwork system diagram cannot be altered by overwriting or adding new network features to it. The Update Subnetwork tool is used for that. These diagrams can only be deleted by the portal utility network owner. So after creation of the utility network, one of the first things you'll do is you'll set the subnetwork definition. So part of setting that subnetwork definition is designating a network diagram template. There's nothing stopping you from using the out-of-the-box diagram templates, but keep in mind that they are designed more as a starting point for exploring functionality rather than being the final product suitable for a production environment. So after you set the subnetwork definition and run the Update Subnetwork tool, you'll be able to see them when you use the Find tool under the diagram section of the utility network ribbon. They're differentiated from stored standard diagrams by the presence of a green exclamation point. So it is recommended to avoid certain rules for subnetwork system diagrams that may impact performance or include features from other subnetworks, like the add connectivity associations and add structural attachments rules, or the expand container rule. So this clip here is from an Esri Utility Network blog. We do have some links at the end, and one of the links is to this particular blog. So for those of you who have used ArcGIS schematics, there are some differences to note. So first off, network diagrams are embedded into the framework of the utility network. So no more extensions. Network diagrams are available to you through the utility network toolbar. Another difference is diagram storage. So with ArcGIS schematics, diagrams were stored permanently. Network diagrams in the utility network are stored temporarily unless you choose to persist them. You will still need to purge the temporary diagrams periodically, which you can do with the Purge Temporary Diagrams tool in the Network Diagram Toolbox. In addition, network diagrams are edited using the same tools you would use to edit your geographic data, where in schematics, it was an entirely different set of tools that end users needed to be trained on. When using network diagrams in ArcGIS Enterprise, those diagrams are stored in a version database so users can see changes over time. So we're going to escape out of here and we're going to move on to some demos with ArcGIS Pro. So hopefully because everything always works great with ArcGIS Pro. Let's just start by, I'll start by saying that I am using the Electric Utility Network Foundation, and I am just using it in a file geodatabase. So when there's parts of the demo where there's notes needing to restart portal or restart an ArcGIS server service, I'll make notes of that or make note of that. So yeah, let's just start by creating a basic diagram. So you would start out, so we'll go to the utility network toolbar up here, and you would start out by selecting features, or in this case, I'm just going to run a connected trace. So what I've done is we'll zoom in here. I have set my starting point. So over here in the tools, I can set a starting point for my trace and I can add some barriers. So I set a starting point on the circuit. I added a couple barriers here so to prevent the trace from going too far and having too many features. So if we scroll over here, I've also put a barrier here and down here. So we'll click on that and we'll run the connected trace. We're going to uncheck the box to include barrier features. And we'll run our tool. And we have 57 features that were selected there. So over here under the diagram section of the utility network ribbon, we have the new. And if we look down here, we have the ones that come out of the box with the utility network foundation are the basic, the collapse containers, and the expand containers. These are very simple diagrams, and it's recommended to create your own, that these are just kind of a starting point for you to play around with and get used to diagrams and what they're capable of doing. So let's just see what the basic diagram looks like. Okay, so let's put this side by side. So the nice thing about Pro is that you can right click up here on the tab and you can place these side by side. And then you can go up here with this highlighted. We'll just take this to the full extent. So right now, this kind of looks a lot like the geographic representation. And also not super great is the fact that we have default symbology. It's kind of hard to understand what's going on here. So one of the first things we'll do is look at how you can change this symbology. So you are going to do that. Let's go over to our tools here with the create diagram layer definition. So under the network diagram tools, we can scroll down here and here's the create diagram layer definition. This is done client server side. I'm going to click over here on that. So I don't have to worry about that because I'm in a file geodatabase. But if you were using ArcGIS Enterprise, you would not use the service. You would use your direct database connection here. So I'm going to grab my utility network, and then whichever diagram template I would want to apply this to. So this is the one that I actually applied, and then you would just click run. So I'm not going to do that because it does take a minute. Once that's done running, if you're working with this in ArcGIS Enterprise, you're going to need to stop and restart either the ArcGIS server service or this particular utility network service. Restart your portal, close and reopen Pro, all those good things. There is a video to kind of show you how to do this at the end. We'll show the link to that. But once that's done, let's take a look at what that looks like. So we'll close out of this basic diagram and we will look at the basic demo. Let's put that side by side. And right off the bat, this looks better. So we can start to see, you know, which features are which. We have our symbology, but it's still laid out. We haven't applied any layouts to this. So what we're going to do first is we're going to set a flag. We're going to set the route here. And that's going to mean that when we apply the layout, so we have different layouts, we'll do the smart tree layout, that whatever our route is set as will be the starting point. So bottom to top, this will be our route. Top to bottom, this will be our route. So we're going to go ahead and select that, and we'll zoom in and put that right on our circuit breaker here. And then we're going to select our tree from right to left, because that's pretty much how things are going here in our geographic view. And now you can see that we have a little bit more simplified, easier to read diagram than if we were to just look at things from this perspective. So we'll look at a couple other things you can do here. I'm going to close out of this. We'll look at editing and propagation. I'm going to move over to a different area. And we're going to go ahead and select these features and just do a basic diagram. I don't want to get carried away here, so we'll unselect those. And we'll just use our basic. And this basic diagram has a couple rules, the connectivity association and structural attachment association. So when we're in the geographic view, the only way to kind of view your structural attachments and your connectivity attachments associations is this view tab here. So in the diagrams, they will show that representation. And also when you're editing, they're going to maintain that. So if we go ahead and use our editing tool, we can select a feature. This feature is currently being contained, so we'll go ahead and move it. And as we go to move it, see that the container is moving along with it. So it's going to, the diagram is going to kind of enforce that connectivity there. Similarly, we could go ahead and grab this point. And as we go to try to move it, move this out of our way. Now it's gonna, let's do that one more time. The box moves along, so does the connectivity. Let's put this in side-by-side mode, and we'll clear the contents, and we'll look at the propagation. We can select items in the diagram and then have those show up in the map and vice versa. Go over here and clear this. So if I want to, say, select this feature, I can click Apply to Maps. And that's going to highlight my feature over there. And then if I wanted to do the same thing, and a little bit of a lag here. Click on the utility and I can apply to diagram. And it's going to highlight over there. Next, we're going to look at, so I'm going to discard my edits. We'll hop back over to our South Station. And next, we're going to look at creating a simplified diagram using Model Builder. Go back over here. So I have my model already created just for the sake of time. So before we even get started with the model, the first thing we need to do is create our template. So if we go over here, we're going to use add diagram template. So under the network diagram tools under configuration, we're going to add that. We will choose our utility network, again, client server. We're going to give our template a name. And then we're going to leave these blank and run them. And once we do that, we're going to need to restart the service, close and reopen Pro. I'm not going to need to do that because I'm working with a file geodatabase. So if you're doing that, just, you know, playing around with it, you're not in ArcGIS Enterprise, you aren't going to need to do that. But you will need to do it if you're in ArcGIS Enterprise. Restart the service and then open and close Pro. Now that we have this template, this blank template, the shell, we can go ahead and start to build ourselves a template that that's simplistic. It does some reductions here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to alter the diagram template. So we'll have our input utility network, our diagram template, any new name that we want to give it. I just left mine the same. We're going to want to remove the diagram template rule and layout definitions. Under here, you could give it a margin. I did 2 meters, and then you're going to want to enable to extend the diagram. Next, we're going to add those connectivity association rules. So we want that so that when, as I mentioned before, when we have our diagram, that we don't have these spaces in our diagram, that we'll be able to see those connectivity associations. So this is pretty simple. We're just going to have our input network so we can pull over our input here and use it as the input network and do the same for our output diagram. And then we're going to leave the defaults and click OK. Next, we're going to add reduce junction by attribute rule. So this is a little confusing because we have over here electric junction. So this is just what will be reduced. So the junction source here in our case is going to be electric device. And we're using the by attribute rule because we want to kind of constrain that. So we're only going to show features that are either a transformer, a switch, or a circuit to make things simplified. So here we're going to use a where clause, and we're going to say where the asset group does not include the values. And then we've gone through and we have the high voltage, the low voltage, and the medium voltage. So we've checked those boxes for switches, transformers, and circuits. Under connectivity constraints, we're going to want to have these boxes checked to reduce if unconnected, reduce if connected to a single junction, or reduce if connected to 2 different junctions. We'll click OK. And then this next rule is a reduced junction rule, but we're not using by attribute because we want to reduce the whole layer. So here we are going to use the actual junction layer. So the junction sources is going to be our electric junction. And we are going to set these same constraints that we had before and click OK. And then we want to go ahead and add a layout. So earlier we did that setting that root junction. So we're going to do that here. And we're going to say that if anything is a circuit, we're going to go ahead and make that the root. So here our junction source to select is electric device. Asset group includes, and then we've got all of that. We've got medium circuit breakers, and then we got our low voltage circuit breakers. So those are going to be our roots for any diagrams that we do. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply the smart tree layout. And so we have some options here. So we're going to do from top to bottom. I'm going to go ahead and leave these defaults. And then we have the ability to change how the edges are displayed. So we're going to go ahead and do orthogonal edges and click OK. You could choose curved edges. We can auto layout, fit to window, we'll validate our model, and then we'll run it. So for this, if you're working with ArcGIS Enterprise, you're going to want to restart the service. You don't need to close Pro out. That we've already created the shell of it, so it already knew about that after we restarted Pro that time. So we've just been altering the diagram, so no need to do that. And let's take a look at the result. So we'll go back here. We need to rerun our trace. So we'll just do that. I got my points are still on there starting in barriers. So we'll uncheck the box for that. We'll run our trace. We have our 57 features. And first, let's go ahead and just do the basic that we had up here before. And then after we get this one set, we'll take a look at the diagram that was created from the model builder. So we're going to set the flag on our circuit breaker. We had that in the model, we did top to bottom. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Those side by side. We did square the edges. So let's go ahead and do that here. All right, and let's go ahead and run our new one. So we'll run diagram demo 2. And this has everything all set up for us. No need to put the route or apply any of the layouts. And you can see that it has been reduced by the junctions that we specified in our model. So again, highly customizable to be able to configure these diagrams to meet your organization's needs. So one of the last things that we had talked about was storing your diagram. So right now you can see over here it says temporary diagram 2. So we'll go ahead and we'll close out of this. So if we wanted to store this diagram, we would just come up here in the Manage tab and we'd click Store. And then we would choose, this is highlighted for us, we'd give it a name. We could decide whether we want it to be public, protected, or private, give it optional tags, and then we would go ahead and run that. This takes a minute, so I'm not going to do that, but I'll show you that once we're in the extent over here, we can go to the Utility Network tab and we can click Find to see all diagrams that have been created for features in this area. So this is the green exclamation point I was talking about. So these are all of the subnetwork system diagrams. This is our diagram that I had saved. And we can open that back up. So potentially you can check this to see if maybe maybe you don't need to create a diagram. Maybe somebody else has already created a diagram or a diagram in a different view that might be useful to you. So you can, again, this is where you can decide to store them if you want, or they can be temporarily just to kind of check things out in the moment. So some flexibility there. Well, that is all I have for the demo. So let's go back really quick and just check out some links that we have. We'll go back to our slideshow. So some of the resources that we'll include here, the first 3 are blogs. So this A Tale of Two Network Diagrams, Subnetwork System Diagrams, and Standard Diagrams. That was where I had that table of the rules that were appropriate for subnetworks. That's all included in this blog. This is a really good blog. oops, we have two over here, understanding network diagrams, what are they, and understanding network diagrams, when to use them. Those are great resources as well. And this is a video from Remy Myers, Apply Map Symbols to Diagrams. So those will be available to you after the webinar.